Is Prince Harry about to be cut off even further from his family and his home country? What is Prince William planning for Trooping the Colour? Does the King want to spend more time with Archie and Lilibet? We'll answer all those and more in another packed show. Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential. I'm Jo Elvin and back this week to talk about the big royal stories is the Daily Mail's royal editor Rebecca English, the Mail on Sunday's editor-at-large Charlotte Griffiths and the Daily Mail's diary editor Richard Eden. Welcome, Dream Trio. Well, before we get into it, a reminder to join our growing gang of subscribers to the Daily Mail Royals YouTube channel. All you need to do is please click that subscribe button and that way you won't miss any of our great royal videos. And we will have a lot of those coming up this summer. Let's get going. Our Rebecca is back from France, where she was covering the royal involvement in the D-Day commemorations, of course, for the 80th anniversary. Rebecca, the whole occasion, big test for Prince William, right? And it seems he passed with flying colours.
Yeah, I can say what a moving and well done event it was. I mean, I think the youngest veteran we met was 98 and the oldest was 104, and they were just, I mean, their stories were incredible. And yeah, it was, I had a big piece for the Mail about it last week because my colleague Robert Hardman was covering the King, and I thought actually this is a very big test for William. I would argue it's his biggest kind of role he's had on the international stage, certainly since becoming heir to the throne, but I would say even before that. And I think he did a really great job. Basically, the King was out there, of course, and he was covering the British event, but his doctors have said to him, look, it's going to be a bit much trying to do the big international event at Omaha Beach in the afternoon. So William deputised. He was in doing the Canadian event in Juneau Beach in the morning and then joined Biden, Zelensky, Macron, and I think there was, I counted 7 presidents in the afternoon. There was a Grand Duke, several Crown Princes, a King, and there was our William. And I thought he was incredibly statesmanlike and dignified when he needed to be, but where he is very good is with the veterans himself, you know, incredibly respectful, but very approachable, you know, and really wanted to listen to these men's incredible stories. So, yeah, I think it was a big tick for him.
Amazing. Now, Richard William has been praised from all sorts of quarters, hasn't he, for his statesman-like appearance?
People have sort of said, he's entering his sort of statesman era. And I think, I mean, obviously it's
eras are very popular with Taylor Swift in town. Everyone's got to have one.
I think, you know, it's sad in a way that he's having to stand in for his father. You know, ideally we would like to see the King carrying out these duties, but it's been really reassuring to have him, William, doing them. He's, you know, carried them off with aplomb, and I think it hasn't just been in Normandy as well. There've been other events this week. There was one very statesman-like photograph that they published from their official account of him on the way to an engagement in Wales. And I think, yeah, it's just reassuring that we have someone ready to deputise and who looks the part.
It's interesting, isn't it, Charlotte? I mean, even since William was a schoolboy, he's been described invariably as the reluctant royal. But, you know, in events like this, he really steps up. He does deliver. Do you think he is so reluctant?
I think he was for years reluctant because there was always this context of how to delay him becoming an active royal. Do you remember when he was at university, of course, he had to be protected. Then when he was a helicopter pilot and he lived with Kate in Wales very remotely, it was all about delaying that moment when he has to be, you know, a king in waiting so that he could have as normal a life as possible. But I think that's sort of over now. I think this is the moment he's going to emerge as a future king, and I think it's been a long process of accepting, I think, for him, but I think he's sort of there, he's done it now.
Now, obviously, lots of effusiveness for William there from our panel and all sorts of places, but Rebecca, the French president's wife, Brigitte Macron, came in for a bit of a dig, didn't she, over a supposed faux pas involving Camilla?
Yeah, and actually there's a few critics of Queen Camilla as well. I mean, it was, I'll be honest, it was a little bit awkward. They were standing paying their respects at the memorial at the British event on Thursday morning, and as they turned to walk away, Brigitte Macron kind of put out her hand to try and kind of almost like hold Camilla's hand or just kind of show her the way, and Camilla didn't really respond. But what it was down to actually was that, you know, Queen Camilla's done a lot of these memorials in her time, and you should never actually turn your back on them. So she was walking backwards while Brigitte Macron was kind of turning away from it slightly. So I think she was just trying to keep her lane, for want of a better word. It was a little bit awkward, but I was with the women in Paris last year and they got to know each other very well. And there was a genuinely warm relationship there. And I think at the end of the day, it's almost a bit unseemly to kind of go on about it, because they were there actually respecting, you know, the thousands of men who laid down their lives for their respective countries.
Is it true, Richard? I think the way the late Queen used to do things, that it was very much a no-go to sort of like ever have any physical contact with our dear departed monarch. But do you just think Charles and Camilla just do things differently anyway?
I'm not sure. I don't get the impression that King Charles particularly likes being touched. I'm not sure he's such a touchy-feely person, really. So I think it is a bit awkward, and I've noticed as well with Queen Camilla that obviously people are used to curtsying or bowing to her, but she seems to greet more and more people with kisses on the cheeks or hugs or whatever. And then you kind of establish this thing of, you know, how do you greet people? And they are different. The royal family are different. That's the whole point. So personally, I'd quite like it if we keep that distance, and also in terms of, you know, getting bugs and germs and stuff, keep a bit of distance and less of the hugging and kissing.
You heard it here first. Richard says, keep your hands to yourself, Camilla.
Well, I was actually going to say, talking about the King, I was with him at an event on Tuesday, and there was Dame Floella Benjamin, you know, absolute icon in this country. And she greeted the King and they were chatting, and I took a little video of it on my phone, and she literally had her arm around his shoulders and he had his arm around her waist, and they were friendly, but you could tell he wasn't entirely comfortable with it. You know, I think, like Richard says, you know, they're a bit more touchy-feely, but not quite.
They need to keep the distance, because it's unfair on the people meeting the King if they don't know quite what to do. Do you remember when Meghan first came on the scene and people would curtsy to her and she'd say, "Oh, I'm from America, just give me a hug," but it actually made the person hugging her look bad because they didn't know what to do. So it's better to have a hard and fast rule, I agree with you, so that everyone just knows what to do.
Do you remember, coming from Australia, I remember the big scandal of the 1950s when the Australian Prime Minister touched the Queen's elbow as they were walking upstairs to the Opera House, and it was like he was almost sent to the Tower.
He was called the Lizard of Oz, wasn't he, for that? Yeah.
He literally just gently touched her elbow.
But then you have Michelle Obama, who everyone got very hot under the collar about when she put her arm around the Queen and Queen Elizabeth, and then Queen Elizabeth made a point of putting her arm around her, so she felt comfortable. So I suppose, you know.
Who knew it was so complicated? Wow, let's see what happens at Trooping the Colour, if there's any of that shenanigans going on. We've got a really busy royal season coming up, haven't we, Rebecca? And it is one of the biggest royal events of the year.
Trooping is massive, and obviously anyone who reads the Daily Mail will have read me right back in March that the King would be attending. It was likely he would use a carriage rather than do it on horseback, just to kind of make it a little bit more comfortable for him, because, you know, as I always keep on stressing, he is still undergoing weekly cancer treatment. But it's great that he's going to be there. Queen Camilla will be there. We'll have Prince Edward, Princess Anne, Prince of Wales on horseback. We'll have all the pomp and pageantry, but it's just going to be in a slightly more comfortable way for him. For me, actually, the big question is whether the Prince and Princess of Wales will be there on the balcony afterwards. That is a rumour that just hasn't gone away over the last few weeks.
Because I thought we'd kind of all accepted that she wouldn't be there.
Yeah, well, I mean, and she's made very clear, look, when my doctors say I'm ready to dip my toe back in, I will happily do that. But it's certainly been a persistent rumour. I spoke to somebody a few weeks ago and said, what do you think? And they said, well, I wouldn't count on it. But it hasn't gone away. And what's very interesting is when I've asked both Kensington Palace and Buckingham Palace about it this week, it's been not saying a word. So
okay, so whereas you think they would issue a denial if it was...
Potentially. Yeah. But I think watch this space. I mean, look, if she is there, fantastic. People will be delighted to see her. If she isn't, don't read anything into it, because she never said she would be. I think it will be a bonus.
Well, the second biggest question after Princess Catherine, Richard, is whether William, being such an important figure in the ceremony, will he bring his children? Will we be seeing George, Charlotte and Louis?
I really hope so. I think if Catherine doesn't feel well enough or confident enough to be there in that huge public gaze, I hope that William takes the children. You know, we want to see that continuity. You want to see the King, Prince William and Prince George. I think it's important for the country. I mean, William may think, oh no, I've got to look after the children as well as everything else he's got to do that day.
I know, I hope Louis doesn't get too bored. Goodness me, it's a lot of standing around, isn't it?
I'm sure there'll be lots of other family who are happy to help look after them. And, you know, remember, it's a strange event because it's a very important public event, but it's also a big private event. It's the King's birthday parade, and they have the private lunch for the extended royal family, who, even though we probably won't see all of them on the balcony, they will be having a lunch with the King and everyone else afterwards.
What do you think's on the menu? I'd love to know what's a bog standard lunch on such a day.
Chicken. I don't know why
I think chicken as well. Something
It's a
small
safe
bird.
bet.
If anybody is there
woodcock.
when it happens, let us know. I'm always fascinated by the royal lunches and dinners.
And it's also worth pointing out, because people sometimes wonder, why do we have the King's official birthday celebration in June when his birthday is November? And it basically dates back, the whole ceremony dates back to Charles II. And then I think they just realised, particularly I think when they were looking at changing it around Edward VII, that just frankly we've got more chance of getting some better weather on a Saturday in June than we have in November.
I didn't know you could change your birthday to a more convenient date.
Well, it's the official celebration, although I don't think the weather forecast looks that good this Saturday.
I really do feel for Catherine, though, at the moment, because imagine how difficult it is. That on the one hand, I'm sure she'd love to be there, particularly if the children are going, but on the other hand, she may not feel up to it.
Yeah.
So I think we just have to say, there's no pressure on her
Absolutely,
whatsoever.
Yeah, and I hope she doesn't feel that. But
And it would be, sorry, Joe, I was
No,
going to
go
say
ahead.
it'd be a bonus. And if she wasn't, I think it would be quite nice to see her parents there, because they are such an enormous force in her life and William's life in helping them, cope with these expanding roles and with their young family. And I think it'd be a lovely touch to see Mr. and Mrs. Middleton
They've been
there.
so dutiful while she's been ill as well. They've really taken charge of the children, and they've just been completely holding the Waleses together behind the scenes.
Wow.
So it would be a really nice thank you to them.
And they've been so discreet over the years. They've never said a word to anyone, and they've just supported the family. I think it would be a nice touch. But who knows? If she is there, it's a bonus, and if she's not, continue getting better.
Well, let's see. And we wish the Princess of Wales the best of health as ever. Now, Charlotte, what other big events can we expect to see? It's really kicking off in Britain.
It is. Well, it's June, so high society loves June because in theory the weather's good, which it's not this year. But it is the big society month, and it all kicks off really with Royal Ascot next week. There is Order of the Garter on Monday, but on Tuesday to Saturday it's Royal Ascot. I'm going on Wednesday, you're going on Wednesday, and it's just it's a really great time because the royals, put on all their best dresses and their biggest hats, and Charles wasn't really into Ascot for years, but last year, obviously he was king, and they named the King Charles Stakes after him, which is a race on Tuesday, and he's really taken charge of Ascot. He loves Ascot, after all, it turns out. So he's going to be there, I think, every day if he can manage it, and certainly on the Tuesday.
I love Ascot. Will you be wearing a massive Princess Anne style plume in your hair that day, Rebecca?
Well, I'm in the royal clothes, so you have to wear a hat.
You do.
But I actually think the best hat wearer, aside from Princess Anne, is Camilla. I think she looks
well, that's my long-standing opinion. Her hat game is unrivaled.
Strong hat game.
Yes, but are you looking forward to it?
Oh, I am. It's really good fun. I mean, I know nothing about horses, and I kind of tend to pick the ones that have got like a name that is my grandparents' name, or so, some residence there. I mean, don't count on me for any tips,
You're back.
guys.
The King's horse, though, he's got a horse running. We're
Oh,
not sure
yeah,
which day yet.
I absolutely,
haven't
and I will. Yeah, I would do if it was someone, that there was a.
Let's place a bet together on the King's horse.
Okay,
Oh
we'll do
my
that on
gosh.
Wednesday.
What could possibly go wrong? You mentioned Order of the Garter a moment ago, Charlotte. That's another big hat event, isn't it? Can you explain that for our viewers?
Yeah, I mean, it's more than just a hat. It's a kind of velvet cap with a massive ostrich plume, and I don't think any of us could rival that.
No.
But it's a real hardy annual of the royal calendar. The Order of the Garter, most ancient order of chivalry in the UK. I think it's 24 members off the top of my head, a maximum, and they're all appointed personally by the King for service to Crown and country, so it's nothing to do with the government. I mean, you do get a lot of
Although there are some prime ministers in it.
You do get a lot of ex-prime ministers there. But obviously you'll see Prince William, Duke of Edinburgh, and actually the Duchess of Gloucester this year. She's now been appointed to the Order of the Garter for her years of loyal service, so she'll be able to accompany her husband, the Duke of Gloucester, for the first time. It's just, you see them process down from Windsor Castle to to St George's Chapel, and there's lots of kind of doffing of hats. It's classically, quintessentially British.
And you'll be there?
It's yeah, I mean, I'll be watching. Obviously, I won't be doing any hat doffing.
Rebecca, just everywhere. I kind of feel like one day that she'll be just sitting on the couch with Charles and Camilla, and they'll just go, "Oh, hi, Rebecca," and just continue watching television.
I just go home and cook tea after that. I mean, my life is very boring, really.
Oh my goodness!
Do you know who won't be there? That I was going to say is Prince Andrew.
Oh no, he won't be.
He's not allowed to process anymore,
yes.
and he's not very happy about it.
But he will be there for the lunch, so he's just not allowed to take part in the
not allowed to be
public
seen. He's not allowed to be seen. Basically.
It's awful. Isn't
See,
it?
I'd be more outraged about missing the lunch than the processing. But that's just me.
Andrew loves to process. It's his favourite thing is to be seen as the grand statesman, but unfortunately he's had his wings clipped on that front.
Yes, he has.
Processing. Stay watching Palace Confidential because we'll bring you updates from all of those events and more, of course, over the next few weeks. Now, Rebecca, lots more to come before we move on to the next section, but you were out at a rather hilarious-looking event with a mix of celebrity royalty and real royalty.
This was the highlight of my week this week. So on Tuesday they held the inaugural King's Foundation Awards at St James's Palace, and it's basically King Charles's baby, and they were giving out awards to students, alumni, supporters of his kind of conglomerate of charities, and you know they do a lot of educational programs highlighting artisan crafts, protecting the environment. But it shows you his clout because there was a great roster of people there. You had David Beckham, who's obviously famously now the latest ambassador for the King's Foundation. You had Sir Rod Stewart, his wife Lady Penny, Alan Titchmarsh, who I ended up talking to David Beckham at length about. The ladies' favourite that is Alan Titchmarsh.
Well,
conversations you never thought you'd have.
David Beckham has been revealed as an avid gardener recently.
He is, yeah. We spoke about him. When we shook hands, I said, your hands are a bit rough. And he said, that's because I was planting my roses at the weekend.
Apparently we must now call him golden bulbs, not golden balls. Who
else was there? Naomi Campbell, Edward Enninfeld. But I mean, I've got a particularly soft spot for Rod Stewart because he's one of the nicest people I've ever interviewed over the years when he comes to the Palace for various events. He's always happy to talk to you. And he just had this really mischievous look on his face. I was like, you're up to something. You could tell he wanted to cause trouble.
Sorry to interrupt, Rebecca, but we do have a clip that I want to show you of that now.
Thank you, Mum. Penny and I are so honoured to be ambassadors for the King's Trust. Foundation. I'm also wonderfully honoured to be a knight, and David, yours is coming soon.
And he was doing a bit of heckling from the sidelines, and when he came up to present his award, he said, can I say something? And everyone was like, well, of course you can, wonderful. And then he accidentally got the name of the charity wrong, and then let quite a kind of loud expletive go down the microphone, which obviously everyone was laughing about, and I won't repeat on here. Wasn't the worst word I've heard, but not the best, and definitely not one for a royal occasion. And then he kind of looked at David Beckham and said, I'm really proud of being a knight, and you know, yours is in the post, mate, basically. And that is, there's a bit of controversy about why David Beckham, arguably one of Britain's greatest sporting ambassadors, doesn't have a knighthood. I think you've probably written about it a few times, Richard. And I could see David Beckham like standing there like this, like laughing with his head in his hands. And I heard him because I was quite close to them. When Rod Stewart came back, he was like, thanks, mate, thanks, Rod. Like, raising. But it was, what was nice, it was a really family atmosphere, and there was David talking to the King about the Euros. Everyone, you know, all posing for a picture with their arms around each other, and it was a great event.
Every week, it's just not the same as the last, is it? It's incredible.
I know, but I actually went home and showed the video of me chatting to David Beckham to my son, and he looked at me and went, God, you're so embarrassing.
Well, we think you're cool.
Trust me, it doesn't go down well at home.
We think you're really cool, Rebecca, as do lots of our commenters. There's loads more to come, including the story over King Charles wanting to see more of Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. We couldn't see any less at the moment, but let's see what that's all about. But before that, let's turn quickly to some of your comments. And thank you for your very nice words about our coverage of the royals at the D-Day commemorations in France. Anne Coombs was one of a number of our Canadian audience who was pleased with William's role there. She wrote, "Bravo, William. It was honour you gave to our Canadian veterans on D-Day." Avondale Mama, meanwhile, praised Princess Anne's role. Princess Anne was so athletic in her younger years, and she is still healthy today and can run rings around all the rest. Love her. Hear, hear. On the subject of whether David Beckham should kneel before the royals to become Sir David, Antoinette Francis says David Beckham definitely deserves a knighthood. Way overdue. He has done a lot for sport and Britain and youth. Vivian Margaret Prescott had this to say about Harry's absence from his old friend, the Duke of Westminster's wedding. There's nothing sad about Harry's self-inflicted isolation. It is wholly deserved. Wow. Well, let's stick with Harry now, because we're talking about Trooping the Colour earlier in the programme, and one pair we didn't even mention as possible for the balcony were Harry and Meghan. Richard, I say that because the very fact that we didn't mention them it speaks volumes, doesn't it?
I think it really does, because over the years, we're always discussing will they, won't they, but that's becoming less of an issue, frankly, because we just know they won't. Were they actually invited to this Trooping the Colour? It's not clear. I mean, remember how when they quit royal duties and left Britain, it was made very clear that they would be welcome to come back at all the big royal events, such as Trooping the Colour, the biggest of the year. Yet now, this is the second birthday parade of King Charles's reign, and again, they won't be here, and no one really expects them to or thinks they've been invited. And it's a very difficult situation, and a lot of it relates to that court case which he launched himself against the British government, and it's all about security. So it's difficult, and you wonder if that will ever change.
Well, it's interesting, Charlotte, isn't it? Despite the fact that Harry reasonably recently had talked about being closer to his father, it seems like as each one of these occasions passes, it is like they're more distant and getting more so.
Yeah, it's really sad, but it's hard to imagine Harry on the balcony now. And I was rewatching and it is his father's birthday, don't forget, so he should be there in a way. I was rewatching Meghan's first Trooping the Colour with Harry today and there's a video, and he really came to life on the balcony, and he was showing her how it's done and where to look, and she actually had a very awkward exchange with the Princess of Wales. But other than that, he really thrived in it, and he obviously really felt like he belonged there, and he really took a lot of pride in showing Meghan.
And that was Meghan's first and last appearance on the balcony.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Meghan actually looked quite uncomfortable, and I can't see her ever wanting to stand on that balcony again, because she has to stand at the back and share the limelight, which we know isn't her favourite thing. And I just can't see him ever coming back without her. He just wouldn't do that. He just wouldn't separate from her for long enough. And I just think she'd probably refuse, even if she was in the UK, which is a sort of hypothetical argument, because we know she doesn't come here. Anyway, it's just very sad. It just feels like it just felt like light years away, don't you think?
Yeah.
That first balcony
There's said to be an open invitation for Harry and Meghan to attend any big royal events that's still available, but I think they realise they're just not wanted. They need to face facts that they're just not wanted there, and I don't think any other members of the royal family want to see them. I mean, let's be honest. Their presence would just sour what should be a really joyful celebration of the King's birthday.
And what do you make, Rebecca, of these reports at the weekend that the King wanted to see more of his LA-based grandchildren, Archie and Lilibet, and that he would never be content with just seeing his grandchildren on the odd video call?
I'm a bit sceptical about this story, because it's quite difficult for the palace to deny, because if they deny it, it's effectively saying, the King doesn't want to see his grandchildren. Like, damned if they do and damned if they don't. Do I think as a grandfather he would like to see his grandchildren? I mean, what grandparent wouldn't? But, I think, as I've said on the programme several times before, while the whole Harry issue pains him, and obviously his grandchildren will be wrapped up in that, he just knows he's got to put it to one side for the moment, because he's got to focus on his job as head of state and this very serious health battle he's undergoing.
So do you see the King in the short-term future being the one instrumental in making any change in this current estrangement?
It's a good question. I mean, Harry has said, if I can see my father, I will come and see him. But, I think that's quite easy for him to say. And then that kind of, puts the onus back on the King. I mean, to hark back to the event I was at on Tuesday when I was talking to Rod Stewart, Rod Stewart said to me, the King told me he went for cancer treatment this morning, and here he is at this event working hard, working the room, thanking people for their support. That's what he's juggling at the moment. So I think others need to do the running rather than him.
Yeah, well, Richard, there was an interesting sounding meeting, wasn't there, that took place at Buckingham Palace yesterday that could potentially see more change to the Harry situation.
This is really intriguing. I haven't actually seen any discussion of this at all, but it was noted in the court circular, the official record of events, that King Charles received a briefing from constitutional experts at Buckingham Palace. And you're thinking, what's that about? Well, we found out during the day that the official line was that it was to do with the general election here and that he wanted advice on all different possibilities. But I do smell a bit of a rat, I'm afraid, that the king...
Not you being cynical.
I don't know. Anyone who has a basic knowledge of politics and royalty knows what happens with elections, and it's very straightforward. King Charles knows all that already. It's genuinely not complicated. So I do wonder if he got them in because he wanted to say, look, while you're here, there's something else I'd quite like to discuss. And he asked them about how can I strip Prince Harry of that Counsellor of State role. And I think it's something which he wants to address. Look, I don't know what happened. Maybe we'll find out from someone who was there.
But is that a complicated thing? Could he not just do that if he wanted to?
It's a question of how he does it. And, there's lots of things he's thinking about at the moment. And I'm sure it's something he'll want to sort out before Prince William becomes king. He doesn't want to leave an unexploded bomb of what to do about Harry. That needs to be dealt with soon. And
arguably, Prince William would sort of apply more of a machete to the whole situation.
Yeah, it might be more delicate if it was dealt with by his father, by King Charles now, rather than Prince William becoming king and bam, taking action against his brother. He might not want that.
Well, and speaking of other favourite sons of the royal family, you've written in your newsletter this week about new information about why the king wants Prince Andrew out of Royal Lodge.
This is such an intriguing story. It's something we've discussed before on this programme, is the question of Royal Lodge. That's the very modest-sounding property, a lodge, which is actually a sprawling 30-room mansion in Windsor Great Park, which is home to Prince Andrew and his ex-wife Fergie as well. And there was a big report in the Times recently that was all about allegedly how the king is sort of desperate to evict his brother from this property. But what wasn't clear, and what remains unclear, is why. Why is he so bothered? They were sort of talking vaguely about maybe they'd want to let this property privately, but everything I've been told, that's a non-starter because it's right there, close to the castle. It's very close to the royal chapel as well, and it's somewhere that you can only really have a member of the royal family living because of the security. So anyway, what several friends of Prince Andrew and Fergie have suggested is that it's a property which perhaps the king would like to earmark for the future for Queen Camilla.
Right.
So, there's intrigue really as to why that is.
And so when you say that, you mean if she outlives Charles. I mean, I hate to be distasteful, but that's basically what we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, basically, let's remember that Queen Camilla will have a very peculiar status indeed when King William is king, because before you've had a Queen Mother, Queen Mary, and they were mothers of the monarch. But in this case, Camilla won't be. She'll be the stepmother. So she doesn't really have any status, and everything passes to William, just as it did to King Charles. And so it leaves, an intriguing question. And like any husband, King Charles would want to make sure that provision is made for his wife. And so, it's a very interesting question.
It really is. What do you think, Charlotte? I mean, if the king is indeed earmarking this for the Queen's dotage, this Royal Lodge, you can imagine that most people would be understanding and sympathetic for that. And probably that would make Prince Andrew's position harder in terms of arguing about staying there.
Yes, because what we know is that Andrew is stubborn and is not going anywhere. So this is a sort of masterstroke because he can't, in all seriousness, say, well, I'm not moving out for Camilla, because of course he has to move out for Camilla if that day comes. So actually I think it's a bit of a masterstroke, and it'll be very embarrassing if he refuses to move out one day in the distant future, hopefully, if Camilla becomes a widow and then Andrew refuses to move out. It's just, can't imagine it.
But here's a question. Would Camilla want to live at Royal Lodge?
I do think it's a really intriguing prospect. It's the one that I hadn't heard of before, and I can see the logic on what we were both saying. The complicating factor, I think, is she's got Ray Mill in Wiltshire, which is the home that she bought following her divorce from Andrew Parker Bowles, and she loves that place.
Is that place quite grand?
No. I mean, it's grander than my little
Apparently it's quite
terrace
scruffy
house,
inside.
but it's not
Proper posh.
It's not fancy.
Yeah.
It's not big and fancy. But it does have a beautiful garden that she's poured heart and soul into, and all her friends are Wiltshire based. So that's the only thing I would find a bit surprising. I would have thought she would like to retreat to Raymil rather than Windsor, which is still in the heart of the royal family. And
But near to London?
Well, you see, I'm convinced that she will probably be allowed to keep Clarence House in the
Right.
short term, because that has been her home actually since she married the then Prince of Wales. And I was in it recently for an event. I mean, it is very much now a home, because of course all the mechanics of business has moved over to Buckingham Palace. So the kind of all the offices you would normally see on the ground floor are actually empty. It's like a ghost ship, and they've got their apartments up there. So it's actually probably one of the most private royal properties you can get at the moment. I know at one point it was earmarked for Harry and Meghan and eventually Prince George, but I wonder if in the short term she would be allowed to keep that and Raymil. But I do see the logic in what you're saying about Royal Lodge as well.
Hopefully we're talking about something which isn't in the dim and distant
yes,
future.
exactly. And I'm guessing that the King didn't give anything away to you in any of your jaunts with him in the last week.
No. Although he did actually see, he saw me and a few others on Tuesday, and he kind of looked at us and went, they have the right sort of people here. Which I think was a nice royal endorsement.
Yeah.
Well, the King's going to be with Andrew, twice over the next week at the Trooping the Colour lunch, and then also at the Garter lunch. So that'll be something for them to discuss over the salmon.
And what is your general take on the whole Royal Lodge affair?
I mean, you guys, I think, had a big discussion the other week when I wasn't here. I mean, I don't think there was lots in that story that was new, but I think what it did really emphasise was this horribly awkward stalemate that's going on. I mean, I know the King actively and his staff actively want Andrew out of there because it's outside of the kind of what I would call the ring of steel around Windsor. The King is having to pay for the security, round-the-clock security, out of his own money, and that's a big long-term commitment for him. It's a long-term commitment out of his personal pocket that he doesn't want to do, and I think they also think it's a bit of a bad look. Andrew and Fergie still rolling around in this kind of 30-room, 10-bedroom mansion. So, but Andrew, of course, as you rightly say, is stubborn about this, and he's got a cast-iron lease that unless he defaults on some aspect of it, they haven't got a hope in hell of getting him out. And I think that's what they almost kind of want to smoke him out, make it so difficult.
Are we almost at the point where he's going to be building barbed wire barricades around himself?
You say that, but I suppose metaphorically speaking, yes. But I think what they want to do is ensure that, financially, he just can't afford it anymore.
Remember last week in that piece we mentioned how they'd said they got the military involved. The King had asked for advice from the Chief of the General Staff. So watch this space.
As I said, rolling in the tanks anytime soon. But Richard, let's move delightfully to the Princess Anne section of the show. We always love it here. This week she's off to the south coast of England. What's she been up to?
Princess Anne, almost needless to say, has had a busy week. She's been stepping in to carry out duties on behalf of the King, notably as an investiture, handing out those knighthoods and so forth. She also attended a boat show in Southampton, which was classic Anne. Some people, you might expect them to sort of turn up an event and not have much to say, make a bit of small talk. But no, she was really appropriate. She went to look at one particular boat, and he was clearly taken aback. There were some quotes from the guy who was running the store, and she was really quizzing him about the intimate details of this boat and the systems in place. And he was very polite, but he said, wow, I wasn't quite expecting that.
It probably felt like a GCSE exam or something like that because she's just so knowledgeable about all that stuff.
And her and Tim are massive sailors. Every year they go on sailing holidays because she likes to go around the country and tick off the lighthouses. I mean, maybe our viewers could... There's a special phrase for it, and I can't remember it off the top of my head. It's something like philology or something like that.
Yeah.
There's an actual... So, and she is a I'm sure our viewers might be able to remind us what it is, but it's her one goal in life is to go around and tick off having seen every lighthouse, around the world that she can.
So the moral of the story is, if you're expecting a visit from Princess Anne, do your homework.
I agree, but also it's just, I never knew that fact about Princess Anne. It was like, do you think they have evenings with like wine, cheese, lighthouse slideshows?
Yeah.
Here's this one from
She's
Cornwall.
passionate about it. I'll look it up and I'll try and remember the word for next week's
If
show.
only Andrew got his thrills in something so wholesome as
I'm being
we
told
might
in
not
my
be in
ear.
such a mess.
I'm being told in my ear that the word of the day is fairology.
That's it.
For
I knew it was
somebody
fair
who
something.
likes to collect this. It's like train spotting for lighthouses, right?
Yes, basically, yeah.
Good, clean fun, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, it gives you a chance
Wholesome.
to visit some of the most beautiful places around the British Isles. So it's a fun hobby
Just
to
stay away
have.
from those treacherous, sort of like rocky shores. But anyway, as we mentioned earlier, this weekend the royals will be gathered to celebrate Trooping the Colour. So here's a look at some of our favourite pictures from that event over the years. Some wonderful memories there. We'll bring you an update on what happened at this year's Trooping on next week's show, of course. And if you don't want to miss that, do make sure you subscribe to the Daily Mail Royals YouTube channel. My thanks as ever to Rebecca, Charlotte, Richard, and to you for watching. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.